Imagine a world where prisons no longer exist. What would that look like? What would it mean for society? Would it be possible to create a justice system that does not rely on punishment and incarceration? In this video, we'll explore these questions and more as we delve into the topic of the abolition of prisons. The concept of the abolition of prisons is a radical idea that challenges our current justice system. Proponents of abolition argue that prisons are inherently violent and dehumanizing, and they do not serve the purpose of rehabilitation or deterrence. They believe that punishment should not be the primary focus of justice and that we should instead focus on addressing the root causes of crime. The United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world, with over 2 million people behind bars. Despite this, crime rates continue to rise, and prisons are often overcrowded and inhumane. Many people believe that the solution to crime is to abolish prisons and focus on alternative forms of justice. In this video, we will explore the history of prisons, their current state, and the arguments for and against their abolition. The origins of the modern prison system can be traced back to the late 18th century, when the idea of using imprisonment as a form of punishment gained popularity. The goal of this system was to reform criminals and deter crime by isolating offenders from society and subjecting them to strict discipline and hard labor. However, it soon became clear that this approach was not effective, and prisons quickly became overcrowded, unsanitary, and abusive. In the United States, the prison system has a long and troubling history of racism and discrimination. From the very beginning, black and brown people were disproportionately represented in the prison population. This was due, in part, to discriminatory laws and policies that targeted minority communities, such as the War on Drugs and the Three Strikes Law. Even today, the racial disparities in the prison system are even more pronounced. Black and brown people are more likely to be arrested, charged, and sentenced to longer prison terms than their white counterparts, even when they commit the same crimes. This is due to a complex web of factors, including implicit bias among law enforcement officials and judges, systemic racism in the criminal justice system, and economic and social inequality. The overrepresentation of black and brown people in the prison system has devastating consequences for individuals, families, and communities. Incarceration can lead to job loss, financial instability, and loss of voting rights, and it can also have a negative impact on mental health and family relationships. Additionally, the prison system perpetuates the cycle of poverty and inequality by creating a permanent underclass of people who are stigmatized and marginalized. The modern prison system is rife with problems, and one of the biggest issues is overcrowding. Prisons are often packed to capacity, with prisoners forced to live in cramped and unsanitary conditions. This can lead to increased tension and violence, as well as a higher risk of disease and infection. Another major issue is understaffing and underfunding. Many prisons are struggling to provide basic services, such as medical care and mental health treatment, due to a lack of resources. This can have serious consequences for prisoners, who may not receive the care they need to manage chronic conditions or mental health issues. Prisoners are also at risk of violence and abuse, both from other inmates and from prison staff. Reports of physical and sexual assault are common, as are allegations of mistreatment and neglect. This can have a devastating impact on prisoners' mental health and well-being, and can make it difficult for them to reintegrate into society after they are released. Furthermore, many prisoners suffer from mental illness and addiction, which are often exacerbated by the harsh conditions of prison life. Despite this, many prisons are not equipped to provide adequate treatment for these conditions, leaving prisoners to suffer in silence. Perhaps the most alarming issue is the high recidivism rate. Despite the high cost of incarceration, many prisoners are released back into society without the skills or support they need to reintegrate successfully. This can lead to a cycle of repeat offending, as former prisoners struggle to find employment, housing, and other basic needs. Advocates for the abolition of prisons argue that the current system is not effective at reducing crime, and in fact, may be perpetuating it. They argue that prisons do not address the root causes of crime, such as poverty, trauma, and inequality. Rather, they often exacerbate these issues by separating people from their families and communities, and subjecting them to harsh and degrading conditions. Instead of punishment and incarceration, advocates for abolition suggest that society should focus on prevention, rehabilitation, and restorative justice. This approach recognizes that people who commit crimes are often victims of social and economic circumstances beyond their control, and that society has a responsibility to address these underlying issues. Restorative justice, in particular, has gained traction as an alternative to the current punitive system. This approach involves repairing harm and restoring relationships between victims, offenders, and the community. It emphasizes the importance of accountability, empathy, and community involvement in the justice process. Restorative justice programs can take many forms, such as victim-offender mediation, community conferencing, and circles of support and accountability. These programs provide a safe and structured space for all parties to share their experiences and perspectives, and to work together to find a resolution that addresses the harm done and prevents further harm from occurring. Opponents of the abolition of prisons argue that it is unrealistic and dangerous to completely eliminate the prison system. They believe that prisons are necessary to protect society from violent and dangerous criminals, and that alternative forms of justice are not effective in deterring crime or holding offenders accountable. Opponents also argue that the current system provides a level of certainty and predictability in the justice system, which is important for victims and their families. Many victims of crime want to see offenders punished and held accountable for their actions, and opponents of abolition argue that alternative forms of justice do not provide this sense of closure and justice. Furthermore, opponents argue that alternatives to prisons, such as restorative justice and rehabilitation, may not be effective in all cases. Some offenders may be too dangerous or unwilling to participate in such programs, and may require long-term incarceration for the safety of society. If prisons were abolished, there are several alternatives that could take their place. One approach is community-based programs, which involve providing resources and support to at-risk individuals and communities. These programs can include job training, education, mental health services, and substance abuse treatment. By investing in these programs, society can address the root causes of crime, such as poverty, lack of opportunity, and systemic inequality. Another alternative to prisons is restorative justice, which focuses on repairing harm and restoring relationships between victims, offenders, and the community. This approach involves bringing together the victim and the offender to discuss the harm that was caused and how it can be repaired. This can lead to a deeper understanding of the impact of the crime and can help both parties move towards healing and closure. Restorative justice has been shown to reduce recidivism rates and create a more peaceful and just society. Transformative justice is another approach that could replace prisons. This approach focuses on addressing the root causes of crime and creating a more just and equitable society. Transformative justice recognizes that many people engage in criminal behavior because they lack resources and opportunities, and that systemic inequalities contribute to crime. This approach involves transforming the justice system to address these underlying issues, such as poverty, racism, and oppression. The question of whether or not prisons should be abolished is a complex one, with valid arguments on both sides. However, it is clear that the current system is not working, and that alternative forms of justice should be explored. By focusing on prevention, rehabilitation, and restorative justice, we can create a more just and humane society that is better equipped to address the root causes of crime.